There's something just as inevitable as death, and that's life. Life, life, life! Think of the power that's in the universe, moving the earth, growing the trees, and that's the same power within you, if you'll only have courage and the will to use it.
Hello again, everyone. This is Abra, and I'm back to give my 2 cents on the historical comic Charlie's London, From East Lane to the Limelight, a graphic novel that tells the story of iconic silent film star Charlie Chaplin. This is the first project from Ayse Fennelly, a fan favorite among Comicsgate, whose online nickname also happens to share her project's name. Before diving into the review, let me start by saying that this is not the genre of comic that I would normally gravitate to. I'm used to the more traditional action-packed superhero style of story. In fact, I was rather late to the party, so to speak, in terms of supporting this campaign. It was only after watching Charlie's appear on various live streams and seeing her obvious passion for this project that I took interest in her book. As I began my research for this review, I admit I knew very little regarding the legendary actor. All I knew was that Chaplin was famous for playing a lovable, goofy tramp character during the silent film era. But as I started to make my way down the rabbit hole, I learned that there is much more depth and complexity to the entertainer than I originally imagined. Charlie's London, From East Lane to the Limelight begins during 1952. Charlie Chaplin has recently become caught up in the Red Scare and a wave of anti-communist measures sweeping the United States. Amidst claims of being a communist sympathizer, the actor is making his way back to his birthplace in London, England, for the premiere of his latest movie, Limelight. Chaplin has not been back to England in over 20 years, and he fears that the country he once called home will not accept him. Upon his arrival at the port in Southampton, all those fears are immediately relieved by the sight of crowds of people cheering his return. Later, the actor and his lovely wife Una make their way to London, where they are staying at the luxurious Savoy Hotel. We learn that Charlie chose this particular hotel because as a poor boy, he used to stare through the windows at the opulence inside. Later that evening, spurred by the memories from his childhood and feelings of restlessness, Chaplin makes his way to East Street Market in Walworth, located in South London. This was his old stomping ground as a small boy, and it is here where Chaplin begins to tell the tale of his youth. Interestingly, Ayse used Chaplin's own words from his memoir for the dialogue in the comic. So essentially, it feels as though the actor is recounting his life directly to the reader. I found this to be a nice creative touch. As a young boy, Charlie Chaplin faced many hardships and was forced to essentially grow up rather quickly. Charlie's father walked out on the family when the boy was only 2 and refused to offer any support for the children. His mother was left to try to earn what money she could performing on stage. Charlie Chaplin's first performance came when he was still a little boy. After his mother was jeered off stage one evening, young Chaplin was ushered out onto the stage to perform. The audience immediately fell in love with the young lad, and it was then that Charlie would realize his love of acting. After a while, Charlie's mother was unable to provide for her children due to reoccurring mental health issues. Soon after, both Charlie and his older brother, Sidney, were forced to live in a state-run institution. While it wasn't the horrible experience that is often depicted in books and movies, the siblings saw little of each other during that time. Several years later, Charlie and his older brother have the opportunity to reconnect. Sidney helps Charlie get an acting contract with the Carno Fun Factory. This job afforded the actor the opportunity to see the world. During the course of his travels, the actor fell in love with the United States and subsequently made it his home. It was in the US that Charlie Chaplin first experienced the wondrous new technology of motion pictures, or moving pictures as they were known. Not long after, he signed on with the Keystone Company and thus began his career in the movies. Chaplin brought the iconic tramp character to life during this time with Keystone. He says that when he created the character, he wanted everything about him to be a contradiction. His pants were baggy and his shirt too tight. His shoes were too big and his hat too small. Even the unique style of his mustache served a purpose. It helped the actor to appear older while not hiding his facial expressions. Audiences immediately fell in love with the character. The remainder of Charlie's London, From East Lane to the Limelight, tells of more events from Chaplin's past which would go on to have a profound impact on the actor's life. One such event was Charlie's ill-fated marriage to Mildred Harris and the death of their infant son Norman when the baby was only 3 days old. This issue of Charlie's London ends moments before Limelight is set to debut. The way Ayse presents Chaplin's life story through flashbacks as the actor is preparing for one of the biggest events of his life fits quite nicely within the graphic novel format. Initially, I was curious as to why Ayse chose a comic book as a way to tell the famous tramp's tale. However, after some thought, the reason seemed perfectly clear. For a good portion of Charlie Chaplin's career, the actor had to rely solely on visuals as a means of communicating to the audience. It's poetic in a way that his story could be shared with the masses again in a comic, another visual medium. Albert Einstein once said of Chaplin upon meeting the actor, "What I most admire about your art is your universality. You don't say a word, yet the world understands you." Charlie Chaplin's life was truly a rags-to-riches story. He was a captivating man who lived quite a full life, filled with both heartache and joy. Ayse Fennelly does a beautiful job of bringing the entertainer's past to life for readers. Her passion for this project and her dedication in seeing this book come to fruition is reflected in its quality. I look forward to the continuation of Chaplin's story in Ayse's follow-up book, Charlie's London, From Walworth to Wartime. In my opinion, Charlie's London is a very important entry to the Comicsgate community, as well as the indie comics scene. It shows exactly what is possible when someone pours their heart and soul into a project. It is proof that the sky is the limit in terms of what can be explored in the world of graphic novels and comics. In the future, I would love to see more creators experiment with non-traditional themes and topics in their projects.